My name is Emily. I wouldn't claim my life was perfect, but I've always been thankful. I always reminded myself that things could be worse. Life as it was had its ups and downs, but it was mine. I had my challenges, yes, but in the end, I appreciated what I had. I was married to Michael, my husband, for 7 years. Most of those years were good, even great, especially the first few years of our marriage. Those years were filled with love, laughter, and dreams about the future. But like many relationships, things began to shift. Over time, I began to notice a change in Michael. The man I had married, the one who used to hold my hand and ask about my day, had slowly started to drift away. He became more focused on his work than on me. The love that once felt so strong seemed to fade, and with it, so did his interest in what was going on in my life. He stopped asking about my feelings, and our conversations became few and far between. It wasn't that I stopped trying. I did everything I could to save our marriage. I tried to rekindle the spark, to reach him, to pull him back into our relationship, but it was as if I was talking to a stranger. Michael had a son from a previous marriage, Jason. Jason was completely different from Michael in almost every way. When I first met him, he seemed a bit distant, like a stranger in my life. I had never known what it felt like to be a stepmother, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. But over time, as I got to know Jason better, I found that we had more in common than I had expected. He wasn't like Michael, at least not in the way I expected. Jason was quiet, thoughtful, and far more introspective than his father ever was. We didn't talk much at first, but gradually, over the months and years, we began to connect. Jason would listen to me when I spoke, and I'd listen to him when he opened up. I began to see him as more than just Michael's son. I began to see him as someone I could trust, someone I could talk to. In many ways, Jason became the person who made me feel seen again. One day, everything changed. Michael had to go on a 3-day Swent business trip. I expected to be alone at home, left with nothing but my own thoughts and the silence of our house. But to my surprise, Jason knocked on the door that evening. He had come back from college for a short vacation and had planned to spend time with his dad. When he found out Michael wouldn't be around, Jason decided that he would stay and spend time with me instead. I never expected that. It was an unexpected yet pleasant surprise. We decided to cook dinner together. Everything seemed normal as we moved around the kitchen. We laughed, we joked, we shared stories from the past. It felt good. But as we worked together, I began to notice something in the way Jason was looking at me. At first, I dismissed it as a misunderstanding, a trick of the light or my imagination. But the more time we spent together, the more it became clear. Jason was looking at me in a way that made my heart race. It wasn't like before when he was just a young man who came to visit his dad. This felt different. This felt personal. I couldn't ignore it. My thoughts started to spiral, and I could feel a lump form in my throat. I didn't know how to process it, nor did I know what to do with these growing feelings. It wasn't like I wanted to act on them, but something inside me was telling me to acknowledge them. Later that night, we sat down on the couch together. We decided to watch a movie, but honestly, I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in the movie. My mind was elsewhere, completely occupied with Jason and what had just transpired in the kitchen. I could feel him watching me, and each glance felt like it was burning into my soul. I couldn't look at him, but I couldn't stop myself from feeling what I felt. There was a strange mix of discomfort and curiosity, a pull that I couldn't quite understand. We started talking after the movie. We talked about life, about dreams, about the future. I had been so starved for conversation like that. Michael and I rarely had these kinds of conversations anymore. He would always be preoccupied with work or too tired to engage. But Jason actually listened, and I needed that. I didn't realize just how much I missed being listened to until that moment. We kept talking for hours, and before I knew it, it was very late. I should have asked Jason to go to bed, but I didn't. I didn't want to stop talking to him. It felt so easy, so right. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what we were doing. It wasn't normal. It shouldn't have been happening. Jason looked at me with those same eyes, the ones that made my heart race, and said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Talking to you feels so good," he said softly, his voice almost vulnerable. "Can I stay here a little longer?" His words dug deep into me, and I knew I had to make him leave, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to do it. I agreed, and we stayed up a little longer side by side. The tension between us was palpable, but neither of us said anything more. I could feel it, though. Something had shifted. Then, out of nowhere, Jason spoke again. Sometimes I realize how much I need to talk to someone like you. His words were quiet, but they struck me like a lightning bolt. I smiled, trying to ease the tension. It's nice to hear that, I said, though I wasn't sure how to feel. I'm happy you're here. But even as I said those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was saying the wrong things. Jason looked at me in a way I couldn't describe. And then, in one swift motion, he reached for my coat. Maybe it's not right to say this, but I think you're really special, he said, his voice soft yet filled with emotion. I froze. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to pull my hand away, but I couldn't. It was like my body was betraying me, moving against my will. For a brief moment, I felt a connection between us that was stronger than anything I had felt in a long time. It was as though the emptiness I had been feeling inside for so long had found someone who understood it. But that understanding came with a price, and I knew I had to stop it before it went too far. I gently pulled my hand away, my heart pounding in my chest. Jason, what you just said surprised me a bit, I said, my voice shaking. I think sometimes we pick up the wrong signals. But this isn't right. We can't keep doing this. Even as I said those words, I felt a heaviness in my heart. Jason looked at me with wide eyes, his face filled with regret. You're right, he said softly, his voice filled with guilt. Maybe I went too far, but please don't misunderstand me. I have a lot of respect for you. He stood up quickly, trying to distance himself. Good night, Emily, he said, and before I could respond, he left the big. I stayed there, sitting in silence, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. My heart was racing, and I couldn't stop thinking about what Jason had said, how he had looked at me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I was too afraid to face my feelings, too confused to understand what was going on inside me. But as much as I wanted to forget it, I couldn't. Jason's words lingered in my mind, haunting me with each passing second. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Jason acted like nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. We kept our distance that day, but the unspoken tension hung in the air. Michael returned home that evening, and everything seemed to go back to its usual routine. But for me, things had changed.